Have you ever stopped to wonder whether the ancient Greece you picture in your mind actually existed at all? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the scene most of us have inherited from movies, school books, and internet memes. Towering marble temples gleam under a flawless blue sky. Fearless Spartan warriors march in perfect formation, muscles sculpted like the statues surrounding them. Wise philosophers calmly debate beneath olive trees, while every citizen enjoys the miracle of democracy before heading off to watch noble athletes compete for honor in peaceful Olympic Games. It is a beautiful image, orderly, heroic, almost timeless. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Much of it is a carefully polished illusion. History has a strange habit of sanding away rough edges until civilizations begin to resemble legends rather than real societies. Ancient Greece may have inspired democracy, philosophy, mathematics, and science, but it was also a place filled with contradictions, political rivalries, propaganda, inequality, superstition, and everyday people struggling through lives that looked surprisingly familiar to our own. The stories we celebrate today are often the survivors of centuries of retelling, while the awkward details quietly disappeared beneath layers of admiration. Victorious cities wrote histories that magnified their triumphs. Later empires borrowed Greek imagery to legitimize themselves. Renaissance artists accidentally reinforced misconceptions, and Hollywood eventually completed the transformation by replacing complicated human beings with flawless heroes. Yet the real Greece is infinitely more fascinating than the myth. Imagine discovering that the world's most famous warriors suffered crushing defeats, that the birthplace of democracy excluded most of its population from voting, that dazzling white statues were once painted in colors bright enough to rival modern festivals, or that celebrated philosophers were sometimes mocked, exiled, or even executed by the very societies they hoped to improve. These are not isolated curiosities. They are windows into a civilization that constantly challenged itself while simultaneously failing to live up to its own highest ideals. Over the next journey together, we will peel away centuries of romantic storytelling to uncover the astonishing reality hidden beneath the marble surface. Rather than diminishing ancient Greece, these revelations reveal something even greater, a civilization made extraordinary not because it was perfect, but because imperfect people dared to ask questions that still echo through our world today. By the end of this story, you may never look at history, or even modern society, in quite the same way again. If there is one image that has become inseparable from ancient Greece, it is the Spartan warrior standing fearlessly behind a bronze shield, ready to fight impossible odds without hesitation. Popular culture has transformed Sparta into a civilization of unstoppable super soldiers who never retreated, never questioned orders, and never experienced defeat. Movies have celebrated them, novels have glorified them, and even modern fitness culture borrows their name as a symbol of ultimate discipline. Yet history tells a far more complicated and arguably more impressive story. Sparta certainly built one of the most disciplined military societies the ancient world had ever seen. From childhood, Spartan boys entered the Aguj, an unforgiving education system designed to produce resilient citizens through endurance, obedience, teamwork, and relentless physical hardship. Comfort was treated almost as a weakness, and survival itself became part of the curriculum. But remarkable training did not make Spartans invincible. Like every army in history, they faced strategic mistakes, political limitations, and determined enemies who learned how to beat them. The famous stand at Thermopylae perfectly illustrates this contradiction. Today it is remembered as the ultimate victory of courage, yet militarily it ended in defeat. Leonidas and his warriors delayed the Persian advance and inspired generations, but they did not stop the invasion alone. Later Greek victories at Salamis and Plataea ultimately changed the course of the war, reminding us that history is rarely decided by a single dramatic battle. Even more revealing was what happened nearly a century later, when the city of Thebes shattered Sparta's reputation at the Battle of Leuctra. Through innovative tactics and brilliant leadership, the Thebans defeated the army many believed could never lose, proving that military excellence depends as much on adaptation as tradition. Behind Sparta's disciplined image also stood an uncomfortable reality. Its citizens represented only a small minority supported by a vast population of helots, who worked the land under coercion. The constant fear of rebellion forced Sparta to devote enormous resources to internal security, meaning its legendary army often existed as much to control its own society as to conquer foreign enemies. Perhaps the greatest lesson Sparta offers is not that perfection is possible, but that reputation can outlive reality. The Spartans became legends because they embodied discipline, sacrifice, and resilience, yet they remained human, capable of extraordinary victories, painful defeats, and fatal mistakes. Understanding that truth does not diminish their achievements, it makes them far more believable and ultimately far more inspiring. Ask almost anyone where democracy was born, and the answer will almost always be Athens. It is one of history's proudest achievements, a revolutionary idea that ordinary citizens could help shape the future of their own society instead of simply obeying kings or inherited rulers. That reputation is well-deserved, but like many famous stories from the ancient world, it becomes more interesting the moment we examine the details. Modern democracies generally aim to give nearly every adult an equal voice, but Athens imagined citizenship in a far narrower way. To participate in public life, a person had to be an adult male born to Athenian citizen parents. Women could not vote. Foreign residents who contributed to the city's economy had no political rights. Slaves had no voice whatsoever. Children, of course, were excluded as well. In reality, only a fraction of the population possessed the privilege that made Athens famous. Imagine attending an event advertised as open to everyone, only to discover that most people waiting outside would never be allowed through the gates. Yet within those boundaries, Athenian democracy introduced ideas unlike anything the ancient world had seen before. Citizens gathered in massive assemblies where they debated laws, taxes, military campaigns, and foreign policy face-to-face, instead of relying entirely on representatives. Decisions could be passionate, unpredictable, and sometimes deeply flawed because public opinion often shifted with persuasive speeches rather than careful evidence. Charismatic orators learned that winning hearts could be just as powerful as winning arguments, a reality that still feels surprisingly familiar today. Athens even developed ostracism, a process allowing citizens to vote someone into exile for 10 years if they believed that individual had become too influential or dangerous. It was intended to protect democracy from tyranny, yet it also revealed how fear and politics could easily become intertwined. Brilliant generals and respected leaders sometimes found themselves removed not because they had committed crimes, but because public opinion had turned against them. Democracy, even in its earliest form, proved capable of both remarkable wisdom and spectacular misjudgment. Perhaps that is Athens' greatest legacy. Rather than creating a perfect political system, it began an experiment that humanity is still refining today. The Athenians demonstrated that government could belong to citizens instead of monarchs, but they also reminded future generations that freedom requires constant expansion, self-criticism, and the courage to include voices that were once ignored. Their democracy was incomplete, yet it opened a door through which countless societies would eventually choose to walk. Today, the names Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are spoken with enormous respect, their ideas filling classrooms, libraries, and universities across the globe. It is easy to imagine that these great thinkers were celebrated during their own lifetimes, surrounded by eager students, and admired by everyone fortunate enough to hear them speak. The reality, however, was far less comfortable. In ancient Greece, asking difficult questions could make you just as many enemies as admirers. Socrates, perhaps the most influential philosopher in history, built his reputation not by delivering grand speeches, but by exposing weaknesses in other people's arguments. He wandered through Athens asking ordinary citizens, politicians, craftsmen, and poets deceptively simple questions that often ended with them realizing they knew far less than they believed. While some appreciated his relentless search for truth, others viewed him as an embarrassment, a troublemaker who undermined respected leaders and encouraged young people to challenge long-standing traditions. Eventually, the city that proudly celebrated free discussion accused him of corrupting its youth and disrespecting the gods. His punishment was not exile or imprisonment but death by drinking poisonous hemlock, a reminder that even societies devoted to ideas can become uncomfortable when those ideas threaten established beliefs. His student Plato preserved many of these conversations and later founded the Academy, creating one of history's earliest centers of higher learning, while Aristotle expanded human knowledge into subjects ranging from biology and ethics to politics and astronomy. Yet even Aristotle eventually chose to leave Athens when political tensions turned against him, reportedly saying he would not allow the city to commit a second crime against philosophy after the execution of Socrates. Beyond these famous names, philosophers often became targets of ridicule in popular theater, where comic playwrights portrayed intellectuals as absent-minded dreamers disconnected from ordinary life. The stereotype of the eccentric scholar is far older than many people realize. Ironically, the very society that produced some of humanity's greatest thinkers also struggled to tolerate them. This contradiction reveals an enduring truth about progress itself. New ideas rarely arrive wrapped in comfort. They challenge assumptions, expose weaknesses, and force societies to reconsider beliefs they once accepted without question. The legacy of Greek philosophy, therefore, is not simply a collection of brilliant ideas, but a powerful reminder that genuine curiosity often demands courage, and those who ask the most important questions are not always rewarded during their own lifetimes. Walk through almost any museum in the world, and you will find rows of elegant Greek statues carved from smooth white marble, their pale surfaces giving the impression of timeless perfection. For centuries, artists, historians, and visitors believed this was exactly how the ancient Greeks intended their masterpieces to appear. White became synonymous with classical beauty, influencing everything from Renaissance sculpture to government buildings and modern architecture. But if you could travel back more than 2,000 years, the Greece you encountered would likely leave you stunned. Instead of endless white stone, you would find temples bursting with vivid reds, brilliant blues, rich greens, shimmering gold, and intricate decorative patterns. The famous statues that now appear calm and monochrome once stared back with painted eyes, colorful hair, detailed clothing, and ornaments designed to make them seem almost alive. Far from being subtle, Greek art embraced color as a way to capture attention, communicate status, and bring stories of gods and heroes into everyday life. So why do we imagine a colorless civilization today? The answer lies not in Greek taste but in the slow erosion of time. Centuries of sunlight, rain, wind, earthquakes, pollution, and human interference gradually stripped away the fragile layers of pigment, leaving behind only the marble beneath. When Renaissance artists rediscovered these weathered sculptures, they understandably assumed the exposed stone represented the original design. Their admiration for what they believed was pure simplicity helped create an artistic tradition that lasted hundreds of years, unknowingly celebrating a version of Greek art that had literally faded away. Modern technology has changed that understanding. Powerful microscopes, ultraviolet imaging, and chemical analysis have uncovered microscopic traces of ancient paint, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct sculptures in astonishing detail. The results often surprise modern audiences because they challenge everything we expect classical art to look like. Yet this discovery teaches us something far beyond archaeology. History is rarely preserved exactly as it happened. Every generation inherits fragments shaped by survival, chance, and interpretation. Sometimes what disappears becomes just as influential as what remains. Ancient Greece was never a silent world carved entirely from white marble. It was vibrant, expressive, and alive with color, reminding us that the past is often more vivid and far more human than the polished images we inherit centuries later. When we think about the Olympic Games today, we imagine athletes from every corner of the world celebrating friendship, unity, and fair competition beneath colorful national flags. The ancient Greeks certainly understood the importance of competition, but the rest of that picture would have seemed surprisingly unfamiliar. For them, the Olympics were not primarily about participation or personal achievement. They were about victory, reputation, and immortal glory. Finishing second earned little recognition, and third place was even less memorable. In a culture where honor shaped both personal identity and civic pride, only the champion truly entered history. This relentless pursuit of victory transformed the Games into one of the most demanding events of the ancient world. Competitors trained for years under strict regimens, following disciplined diets and enduring exhausting physical preparation in hopes of winning a single wreath of olive leaves. The prize itself held almost no monetary value, yet the prestige it represented could change a person's life forever. Victorious athletes often returned home to public celebrations, lifelong privileges, financial rewards from their city, and even statues erected in their honor. Success elevated not only the individual but also the reputation of the city-state they represented. Unsurprisingly, where fame exists, temptation follows. Ancient records reveal numerous cases of bribery, corruption, and cheating. Some athletes attempted to buy victories or persuade opponents to throw competitions, while officials occasionally accepted favors in exchange for leniency. Those caught faced severe penalties, including heavy fines that funded bronze statues placed near the Olympic entrance as permanent reminders of dishonesty. Every competitor walked past these monuments before entering the arena, a powerful warning that glory built on deception would outlive the cheater's reputation. The competitions themselves were equally unforgiving. Boxing featured no weight divisions, wrestling demanded extraordinary endurance, and the fearsome pancration combined striking and grappling with remarkably few restrictions, making it one of history's earliest mixed martial arts contests. Broken bones, dislocated joints, and fatal injuries were unfortunate, but accepted realities of the Games. Yet despite the violence, the Olympics achieved something extraordinary. During the sacred Olympic truce, rival city-states temporarily suspended warfare, allowing athletes and spectators to travel safely to Olympia. Even bitter enemies could gather under a shared tradition that celebrated human excellence above political conflict. Perhaps that is the enduring lesson of the ancient Olympics. Greatness has always required sacrifice, but the highest victories are not measured solely by physical strength. They are remembered because they unite people through a shared belief that extraordinary effort can inspire generations long after the contest itself has ended. If modern movies and history books were our only guides, we might assume ancient Greece revolved around two great rivals, Athens, the city of philosophers and democracy, and Sparta, the kingdom of fearless warriors. While both certainly earned their place in history, they represented only a fraction of a civilization that stretched across hundreds of independent city-states, each competing to become the cultural, political, or economic center of the Greek world. Ancient Greece was not a unified nation, but a constantly shifting network of allies, rivals, trading partners, and occasional enemies, where every city believed its own customs were the finest, and its ambitions deserved to shape the future. Among these overlooked powers stood Corinth, strategically positioned on the narrow isthmus connecting mainland Greece to the Peloponnese. Whoever controlled Corinth controlled one of the most valuable trade routes in the Mediterranean, allowing merchants to move goods efficiently between two seas without sailing around dangerous coastlines. Wealth poured into the city from distant lands, transforming it into a thriving commercial hub where traders, craftsmen, sailors, and travelers exchanged not only products, but also ideas and innovations. Farther north, Thebes quietly developed into one of Greece's most formidable military powers. Although often overshadowed by Spartan legends, Theban generals revolutionized battlefield tactics, proving that discipline alone could be defeated by creativity and intelligent leadership. Their stunning victory at Leuctra shattered Sparta's aura of invincibility and demonstrated that no military reputation lasts forever if it refuses to adapt. Across the sea in Sicily, Syracuse emerged as another remarkable Greek city, growing into one of the wealthiest and most influential centers in the Western Mediterranean. At times it rivaled or even surpassed many mainland cities in population, economic strength, and military power, reminding us that Greek civilization extended far beyond the borders of modern Greece. Every city contributed something unique, whether advances in commerce, philosophy, engineering, naval warfare, literature, or politics. Together they formed an interconnected world driven by competition, cooperation, and constant exchange. Perhaps this diversity explains why Greek civilization proved so influential. Progress rarely emerged from a single dominant power. Instead, innovation flourished because hundreds of communities challenged one another, borrowed successful ideas, and competed to surpass their rivals. Ancient Greece was not the story of two famous cities standing alone against history. It was a vibrant mosaic of independent societies, whose collective achievements became far greater than the accomplishments of any single polis. Long before search engines, political analysts, or scientific forecasting, there was one place where kings, generals, merchants, and ordinary citizens all believed they could glimpse the future. Hidden on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the sanctuary of Delphi became one of the most influential destinations in the ancient world. People traveled hundreds of miles, crossing mountains and seas, hoping that Apollo himself would reveal the right path through his priestess, the mysterious Pythia. To modern audiences, the oracle is often imagined as a supernatural fortune teller delivering flawless predictions that never failed. Yet the real story is far more intriguing because Delphi's greatest power did not come from certainty, it came from ambiguity. Visitors rarely received simple answers. Instead, they were offered carefully worded responses filled with symbolism, metaphors, and multiple possible meanings. The most famous example involves Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia, who asked whether he should invade the Persian Empire. The oracle replied that if he crossed the river, a great empire would fall. Encouraged by what sounded like a promise of victory, Croesus launched his campaign, only to discover that the empire destined for destruction was his own. The prophecy had proven accurate, but not in the way anyone expected. This remarkable flexibility explains why Delphi maintained its reputation for centuries. Whatever happened, the prophecy often appeared fulfilled once events were interpreted afterward. Yet reducing Delphi to clever wordplay misses its deeper importance. The sanctuary functioned as far more than a mystical shrine. It served as a diplomatic meeting place, a religious center, and a symbol of shared Greek identity where rival city-states sought guidance before wars, colonization, alliances, and political reforms. Decisions made after consulting the oracle shaped the course of Greek history because leaders believed divine approval strengthened public confidence. Whether the messages truly came from Apollo mattered less than the collective faith people placed in them. In many ways, Delphi reminds us that human beings have always searched for certainty in uncertain times. Today we consult experts, economic forecasts, opinion polls, and algorithms instead of priestesses sitting above sacred caverns, but the desire remains unchanged. We still hope someone can tell us what tomorrow holds, even though the future has always resisted simple answers. Perhaps Delphi's greatest lesson is not that it predicted history perfectly, but that it reflected an eternal human truth. Uncertainty has always been one of civilization's most powerful forces, and our response to it often shapes history more than certainty ever could. Among the many gifts ancient Greece offered the world, medicine remains one of its most influential. Before Greek physicians began studying disease, illness was often explained as punishment from angry gods or the work of malicious spirits beyond human understanding. Greek thinkers challenged that assumption by insisting that sickness had natural causes which could be observed, recorded, and understood through reason. This simple shift in perspective became one of the greatest turning points in medical history because it encouraged doctors to search for evidence instead of relying entirely on superstition. At the center of this transformation stood Hippocrates, whose name still survives in the oath taken by many physicians today. He encouraged careful observation, detailed case records, and ethical responsibility, laying the foundation for medicine as a profession rather than a form of religious ritual. Yet despite these remarkable advances, Greek doctors faced an enormous obstacle. They simply lacked the scientific knowledge available today. They knew nothing about bacteria, viruses, genetics, or the microscopic organisms responsible for countless diseases. Without these tools, they created sophisticated theories that often rested upon incorrect assumptions. The most famous was the theory of the four humors, which claimed that health depended on maintaining balance between blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Whenever illness appeared, physicians believed one of these invisible forces had fallen out of harmony. Treatments naturally focused on restoring that balance through special diets, herbal remedies, exercise, fasting, purging, or the infamous practice of bloodletting. Some recommendations, particularly those emphasizing moderation, healthy eating, physical activity, and clean living, remain surprisingly sensible even by modern standards. Others undoubtedly caused more suffering than relief. Yet judging Greek medicine solely by its mistakes misses its greatest achievement. Scientific progress rarely begins with perfect answers. It begins with the courage to ask better questions than previous generations. Greek physicians carefully observed symptoms, compared patient outcomes, debated competing ideas, and attempted to explain disease through logic instead of fear. Their conclusions were often flawed, but their method represented a revolutionary step toward evidence-based thinking. Every modern hospital, laboratory, and medical breakthrough owes something to this transformation. The Greeks did not cure every illness or fully understand the human body, but they helped replace mystery with investigation. In doing so, they demonstrated that knowledge grows not by pretending to know everything, but by accepting how much remains unknown and continuing the search for truth despite that uncertainty. Few names in history carry as much weight as Alexander the Great. By the age of 30, he had conquered an empire stretching from Greece through Egypt and Persia to the edges of India, forever changing the political map of the ancient world. His victories remain so astonishing that they often overshadow nearly every other figure ancient Greece produced. To many people today, Greek history seems to build toward Alexander as though centuries of philosophers, lawmakers, scientists, playwrights, and generals existed merely to prepare the stage for one remarkable conqueror. Yet that perception overlooks one of the greatest strengths of Greek civilization. Its brilliance never belonged to a single individual. Long before Alexander was born, Solon had introduced reforms that laid important foundations for democratic government, while Pericles guided Athens through a cultural golden age that witnessed breathtaking achievements in architecture, philosophy, and the arts. Socrates transformed intellectual inquiry by teaching people to question accepted truths rather than blindly accept them. His student Plato established the academy, preserving ideas that continue to influence education and political philosophy across the world. Aristotle, in turn, expanded human understanding across subjects ranging from ethics and biology to astronomy and logic, demonstrating a curiosity so vast that he became one of history's first true polymaths. Beyond philosophy, Greek innovation flourished in mathematics, engineering, astronomy, and literature. Archimedes revolutionized geometry and mechanics with discoveries that still inspire scientists today. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, using little more than observation, shadows, and mathematical reasoning. Hipparchus advanced astronomy by mapping the heavens with remarkable precision, while playwrights such as Sophocles and Euripides crafted tragedies whose emotional depth continues to captivate audiences more than 2 millennia later. Even military greatness extended well beyond Alexander. Themistocles masterminded the naval strategy that saved Greece during the Persian Wars. Leonidas became a lasting symbol of courage despite defeat, and Epaminondas transformed battlefield tactics by defeating Sparta at the height of its power. Together, these individuals reveal an extraordinary pattern. Ancient Greece produced not one exceptional mind, but generation after generation of innovators who challenged convention and expanded human knowledge. Alexander deserves every ounce of admiration history has granted him, but his greatest legacy may also remind us of something larger. Civilizations become truly remarkable not because they produce a single hero, but because they create an environment where countless extraordinary people can inspire one another across generations, each building upon the achievements of those who came before. It is impossible to celebrate the achievements of ancient Greece without confronting one of its deepest and most uncomfortable contradictions. The civilization that gave the world revolutionary ideas about freedom, citizenship, justice, and human reason also depended heavily on a system that denied those very principles to countless people. Slavery was not a small or isolated institution hidden at the edges of Greek society. It was woven into its economy, households, agriculture, mining, craftsmanship, and even the daily routines that allowed many citizens the leisure to debate philosophy, participate in politics, and pursue education. In Athens, the city remembered as the birthplace of democracy, thousands of enslaved men and women worked behind the scenes to support the prosperity that made its cultural achievements possible. Some served in homes as cooks, tutors, or craftsmen, while others endured far harsher lives in workshops or the infamous silver mines of Laurion, where dangerous conditions claimed countless lives beneath the earth. Sparta relied even more heavily on forced labor through the Helots, a population tied to the land, and compelled to provide food and resources for Spartan citizens. In many regions, Helots vastly outnumbered the Spartans themselves, creating a constant atmosphere of fear. The military discipline that made Sparta famous was shaped not only by the threat of foreign invasion, but also by the ever-present possibility of internal rebellion. This reality reveals an irony rarely explored in popular culture. The same society admired for producing fearless warriors also lived in perpetual anxiety over maintaining control of those it oppressed. Even many of Greece's greatest philosophers accepted slavery as a normal feature of society. Thinkers who debated justice, ethics, and the ideal state often failed to question an institution that modern audiences immediately recognize as profoundly unjust. Rather than dismissing Greek civilization because of this contradiction, we should recognize it as a reminder that every society, including our own, possesses blind spots that future generations may judge far more harshly than we expect. History is rarely divided into heroes and villains. More often, it is a story of remarkable achievements existing alongside equally remarkable failures. Ancient Greece transformed philosophy, science, politics, and culture in ways that still shape our world, yet its accomplishments were built within a society that never fully extended its highest ideals to everyone. Perhaps the greatest lesson is one of humility. Progress is rarely complete, and every generation must continue expanding the boundaries of justice beyond those accepted by the generations that came before. After exploring the myths, contradictions, triumphs, and failures of ancient Greece, one question naturally remains. If this civilization was so imperfect, why does its influence continue to shape the world more than 2,000 years later? The answer lies not in flawless achievements but in an extraordinary willingness to question, experiment, and improve. Few civilizations have left fingerprints on as many aspects of modern life. Every time a citizen casts a vote, a courtroom debates justice, a scientist tests a hypothesis, or a student learns geometry, echoes of ancient Greece quietly remain in the background. Yet these ideas did not survive because the Greeks discovered perfect answers. They endured because the Greeks believed difficult questions were worth asking, even when those questions challenged tradition, authority, or deeply held beliefs. Their philosophers argued endlessly because they understood that wisdom grows through debate rather than certainty. Their scientists observed nature because they believed the universe followed understandable patterns instead of random magic. Their playwrights explored ambition, jealousy, courage, and grief because they recognized that human nature changes far more slowly than technology. Even their political experiments, incomplete as they were, introduced the revolutionary idea that government should answer to citizens instead of existing solely to serve rulers. At the same time, their failures remain equally important. Sparta reminds us that military strength alone cannot guarantee lasting success. Athens demonstrates that democracy must constantly evolve if it hopes to include everyone. The acceptance of slavery warns us that even advanced civilizations can overlook profound injustice while believing themselves enlightened. These contradictions transform ancient Greece from a distant legend into a mirror reflecting challenges that societies still face today. We continue debating freedom, equality, leadership, education, truth, and responsibility because these questions have never truly disappeared. The names have changed, the technologies have advanced, and the cities have grown larger, but the fundamental dilemmas remain remarkably familiar. Perhaps this explains why Greek history never grows old. It is not simply the story of people who lived long ago. It is the story of humanity learning, failing, adapting, and trying again. The marble temples may stand in ruins, and the great city-states may have vanished, but the conversations they began continue in classrooms, laboratories, parliaments, and homes across the globe. The greatest legacy of ancient Greece is not any monument carved from stone. It is the enduring belief that progress begins when ordinary people dare to question the world around them and refuse to stop searching for better answers. As our journey through ancient Greece comes to an end, perhaps the biggest surprise is not that so many popular stories turned out to be incomplete, but that we wanted to believe them in the first place. We have always been drawn to simple narratives filled with flawless heroes, perfect civilizations, and clear victories because they are easier to remember than complicated truths. Yet history rarely rewards simplicity. The Spartans were courageous, but they were not invincible. Athens pioneered democracy, but it did not grant freedom to everyone. Philosophers changed the course of human thought, yet many were ridiculed or condemned during their own lifetimes. Brilliant white statues once exploded with vibrant colors, while the civilization celebrated for reason also relied upon superstition, inequality, and forced labor. None of these discoveries diminish ancient Greece. On the contrary, they make its achievements even more remarkable because they were accomplished by ordinary human beings confronting extraordinary challenges. The Greeks did not build a perfect society. They built one willing to argue, experiment, question, fail, and begin again. That restless curiosity became their greatest invention, and it remains one of humanity's most valuable qualities today. Every generation inherits stories from the past, but it also inherits the responsibility to question them, refine them, and search for evidence instead of comfortable assumptions. Perhaps that is exactly what the Greek philosophers hoped future generations would do. They were less interested in handing us final answers than in teaching us how to think critically enough to discover our own. When we look beyond the marble temples and heroic legends, we find something far more inspiring than perfection. We find a civilization filled with ambitious leaders, stubborn citizens, visionary thinkers, talented artists, fearless explorers, flawed institutions, and ordinary people trying to understand an uncertain world, just as we are today. The distance between ancient and modern humanity suddenly becomes much smaller than it first appears. Their fears resemble ours. Their hopes resemble ours. Their mistakes certainly resemble ours. And perhaps that is why ancient Greece continues to matter after more than 2,000 years. Its greatest monument is not the Parthenon, nor the Academy, nor the battlefield of Thermopylae. Its greatest monument is the enduring belief that civilization advances whenever people dare to challenge accepted ideas with reason, evidence, and imagination. If this journey has taught us anything, it is that history becomes most powerful not when it confirms our myths, but when it encourages us to see ourselves more clearly through the lives of those who came before us. Ancient Greece changed the world not because it was perfect, but because it embraced curiosity, debate, and the pursuit of knowledge. Its triumphs deserve admiration, its failures deserve honest reflection, and together they remind us that every civilization, including our own, is a work in progress. The greatest way to honor history is not to repeat its legends, but to learn from its realities.